name is Tania Houtzager, and I run Embark Gallery, which is a nonprofit art space that shows graduate student work from Bay Area art students. And the gallery is about a year old, and so most of the students we work with are still in school, but some of the students we've worked with have graduated and gone off into the real world. And the conversation today is going to be about what that first year of the real world after grad school is like. And it mostly stemmed from this conversation I've had with so many people that are current students who come up and ask me, because I'm the expert, what they should do afterwards in terms of money. You know, how should they find a job that will help them balance out their art practice and their ability to pay their rent. And I have given many different answers in an attempt to help, but I feel that people who have actually done it are probably better at giving that answer than I would be. So we have 4 different panelists here who went to 4 different grad schools from the Bay Area and are all 1 year out of their grad students. So they're all masters in fine arts, hence the name of the talk. And one of the artists who is going to be here, Alice Combs, actually can't be here today because she has to work, which I feel is very appropriate for a conversation about how to, you know, live your life and work while being an artist after grad school. And she left a voicemail for me explaining why she can't be here today, so I'd like to play that to kind of start us off and start off that conversation about work and grad school and art. So I hope you all can hear this.
Hey Tania and Embark panel participants, this is Alice. I'm currently at work and not there with you, which kind of gives you an idea of what I have to deal with post-graduation. I work at a frame shop, so yeah, I'm here with all the frames and glass and everything. I tried to get the weekend off, but I wasn't able to get today off because I wanted to do the parking lot art fair. So I guess this is a great example of trying to balance priorities in your life and art and trying to pay rent. I hope the talk is great, and I hope to work with you guys in the future. Please keep in touch. Okay, bye.
So I feel that that's a very appropriate, you know, symbol of the struggle that people have right after graduating. Like, how do you balance cultivating relationships in the arts and still having a job and getting the right hours to do the events you want to be doing? So instead of Alice here today, we have Christopher Swire, who also went to SFAI, and is also 1 year out. Yeah. We have Malena, who went to Mills, Chris, who went to Stanford, Christopher Swire, and Michelle Ott, who went to UC Berkeley. And my first question for you guys that I think would be great if each of you could answer is, like, right after you graduated, what were the sorts of job or art opportunities that you were looking at right after graduating? And what are you doing now? Like, does it match up what you were looking at and what you ended up doing now, or is it the opposite of what you had set out to do when you first got out of school? So,
Shall I start?
You can start.
So I feel actually pretty lucky to still have some institutional support from SFAI. When I was graduating, I didn't know what I would be doing, but over the summer, I guess I applied to a bunch of things, but I was applying to different residencies and art exhibition opportunities, and wasn't focused so much on the money, because I knew I was going to a residency over the summer, and so I had about 2 or 3 months to figure it out before I came back, and I thought maybe I'll go live with my family, or take a couple months off, or just find some sort of retail job, find something maybe in a gallery or with friends or something like that. But I applied to this fellowship that SFAI just came out with, where they partnered with Caddis Art Foundation. And so the point of the fellowship was that one recent MFA or MA student out of SFAI would then receive a fellowship for 9 months and work for the 2 galleries on one single show. So it would be an exhibition at SFAI and perhaps an acquisition from Caddis, but it's been working with an artist from the Caddis collection as well. So I received that about 2 months into the summer and felt like, okay, problem solved. it comes with a stipend that's paid for my rent and a bit more. So that sort of worked out for me, but it's true, it's only 9 months and there's only one of them at this point.
For me, I'm a little of a strange case because I'm not traditional age college student. Well, I don't know. I don't know what's tradition.
Right.
But so I took a long break between graduating from high school and then finishing my education. I took 10 years off and started my own chocolate business in 2006, and then it was wonderful at first, and then it started to just drive me totally insane, and so I was compelled to go back to school and career change. And I mean, the thing that I really was passionate about studying, the only thing that I could really get behind pursuing to a graduate degree was art, and then it turned out that that's not an extremely practical thing to make a living at. And so I when I graduated, I had some shows immediately out the gate. I had a Root Division show, and I had a Minnesota Street Project show, which I had to pay for. They weren't paid opportunities. And then I did get asked to do an installation at Limited Edition, which is a design firm that has a new art program where they give artists a $1,200 stipend to just do something, anything on their wall. And that was really, really exciting. But meanwhile, I have to pay rent and everything is really expensive in the Bay Area. And so I just found that, I had kind of dreamed to be able to transition away from the chocolate business and do, a different sort of career. But it was I'm just on this hamster wheel, and it just ended up being that I figured out that I was just really lucky to have a stable source of income, just seeing what my peers had to go through to kind of try and cobble together some kind of living after school. I just found that it made sense to just continue nurturing this project that I had been working on, since 2006, and now it's almost our 10-year anniversary. So I'm still, I still have a chocolate business, and I'm trying to figure out ways to keep it interesting and basically bridge my artistic interests and my chocolate interests. And so, I am doing custom chocolate work for the Asian Art Museum, and doing custom chocolates for Abrams Claghorn Gallery, and just a lot of different projects that. Those particular projects aren't the most lucrative, but they're a way for me to kind of just stay interested in doing it. So I'm balancing that, trying to have my own business and then still have this art practice. But I'm finding that I really like having a way to make a living and fund my work that's outside of selling the work, because then I feel just more free to just try things out that are totally experimental and wouldn't necessarily work in a traditional commercial framework for art, and I can just do it and then also make other work that if it sells, it's just great bonus, I can do something extra. But yeah, my basic financial needs are met through my business. And I wanted to share before I forget that I went to a pro arts panel on this subject of how artists make a living. And Christina Empedocles and Stephanie Sujuka were on the panel, and Christina Empedocles has started, she's an artist from CCA, and she started, she's also a financial planner. She got education about financial planning, and she started a thing called Artists Making Dollars and Cents that's all about business advice for artists who want to have their own businesses or figure out ways to fund their art practice and get real about making a living. So I just wanted to recommend that if anybody would find that useful.
Is that a blog?
It's she has a Facebook group, and then if you Google her name, Christina Empedocles, then you'll probably find the Facebook group, and then she does workshops and boot camps and things.
I would definitely say that kind of challenge of finding a way to balance making a living and continuing my art practice has been the biggest challenge that I've faced since getting out, and it's something that I definitely haven't figured out yet. But I can relay what I've done and how I've approached it and what I've kind of concluded from that. First off, I'm married and my wife has a kind of normal 9-to-5 day job, and she's very supportive of me, and her consistent income has been a huge benefit to us, just as far as making sure that our basic costs are covered. It certainly is not enough to support us entirely, but it's enough so that we don't have to stress too much about our finances. I definitely want to become a teacher, and so not taking on a full-time job that would prevent me from doing that was one of my primary goals. So I ended up patching together a lot of small part-time positions, which, looking back, I think has been a actually rather significant mistake. As it turns out, having 4 part-time jobs is a lot more difficult to manage and a lot more time-consuming than just having one consistent source of income. So that's something I probably wouldn't do again, given the option. But I found a teaching position. I have a job as a handyman, basically. I build decks and do electrical work and stuff like that. And that's actually been really fantastic. And that's been very flexible for me, and that has worked very well as far as being able to shuffle that around my art practice, but also was managing some artist studios, and just the pile of all those things coming together actually ended up being a little bit more difficult to manage and interfering with my art practice more than I would have liked. Fortunately for me, I was able to take advantage of some opportunities from some local organizations and from my university in graduating. So I was very lucky to be granted a graduate fellowship at the Headlands, and so I have a studio up there. I get to interact with the community and participate in their public events, which has been an incredible experience in every single way, and that's probably the number one sort of recommendation I would give to anybody, is really take advantage of those opportunities, and specifically that one is so phenomenal that I can't overstate how vital it's been to my practice over the past year. I also was granted a residency in a program in Paris through Stanford, where they covered 3 months of a live workspace there for me, and that was also obviously an amazing experience, one that really helped me further my project that I've been working on, and also just have this really great experience of living in Paris for 3 months. So between those two things, I've definitely had the support after graduation from my institution to continue my practice and have the opportunities to do that and engage with other artists, and that's been great. And unfortunately, that those opportunities are starting to dwindle now that I'm a year out, but I'm certainly looking for more of those coming out.
I also have had a year of good fortune with UC Berkeley and being given sort of a fellowship of a studio for a year in exchange for some work at the RFS campus. So it sort of is like there's another ending that's happening this spring, like with any of us who've gotten this like extra year of like support in whatever means it is. So like I feel like I'm kind of beginning another phase of like
almost like graduating again.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, now I'm going to get out of the Berkeley machine a little bit even more this year. But when I think about what I was doing last year, I was just applying for so many things. I would just like apply, like my strategy is always like apply for everything, expect nothing. And so like I was applying for teaching jobs, fellowships, residencies, stuff like that. And I was certainly doing that before grad school, so it was just kind of a continuation of that practice. But the thing that has changed is that I feel like I was getting some illustration gigs that were paying money, which was really pleasant. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a thing that I hadn't considered option in terms of like building a career around it. But I have found a way to do those things and create a balance where I'm accepting projects that are really interesting to me and then able to kind of do work in my studio that is also like important to me. But also it's just like piecing together small part-time jobs where, it's a lot of organization and trying to like manage fitting the pieces together of the puzzle. And so now, again, this year I was applying for 1 million jobs and just trying to like, figure out how to accept one that's gonna be like maximum income, minimum time, and kind of not be a place I don't want to be, but you know, kind of manage that. So hopefully that's what's about to happen. Yeah.
It's really great to hear from all of you about the opportunities that the schools are providing, where they're really considering what happens once you finish the program. Like these opportunities that give you a year of doing something or set you on a path where you still feel a little bit connected to the school, but it also pushes you out into the community a little bit more, especially like the Headlands, where you're meeting a new community of people, where hopefully by the end of it you'll know some people who may help you in the future with other opportunities. And also the idea that if you have skills that you were using before grad school, that you can then come back and use those again afterwards, like your chocolate business.
Yeah.
That's one thing I've talked with a lot of students about. I always ask, you know, do you have any, what were you doing before this? Because often grad programs do not want to accept you right out of undergrad. They want you to have life experience, maybe have a couple of jobs that you'd be okay with going back to afterwards, because you do in reality have to have that art work balance. And I feel like this is a good time, especially after you explained your situation, to talk about blasting it, which is something we have in our room up there. In addition to the 8 other artists and artworks we have in our space, we have blasting it. This is one of the 3 copies that I have, the precious copies. And my favorite page in here, this is written by Michelle Ott, is the page that shows all of the jobs she's ever had. And it's a full range from like super impressive, interesting stuff to like dog walker, because like it's all valid stuff, you know, like there's so many things you can do. And I think that's one of the barriers that people see when they're graduating from grad school, that they've gone through this sometimes very expensive master's level degree, and then they don't want to go back to thinking that the best job, the most highly paying job, could be a $40 an hour babysitting job instead of a $40 an hour, you know, gallerist job. But I think those are all valid things, and this book does a really, really amazing job of talking about that in terms of like perseverance, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know.
So I had a teacher who actually, when I was in undergrad, was like, well, you might be cleaning toilets. Like, I cleaned toilets after I got an MFA from Yale. That's what she said.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah. Okay, cool. Like it's just like any kind of, I mean, it's like artwork that comes in fashion. Like you're gonna hit a high point and you're gonna hit a low point and stuff like that. And it's sort of is like, yeah, being willing to say yes to something, a situation that works for you. It might be being a janitor.
Right.
Like for me, that was like actually one of the best jobs I've ever had. Like it was great.
That's great.
I did not worry about it. I left it there. Like I actually got terrible reviews as a janitor. I was like a level 3 janitor,
Yeah.
Opposed to being a level 5 janitor in the system of like evaluations. But for me, I like did a lot of creative work during that period of time, and it was like, okay, cool. I don't care about being a janitor, so I can care about all these other things. So yeah, being able to say yes to things is sometimes
Yeah.
plus.
So I highly recommend, if anybody needs some like inspirational life advice, this book is just so fantastic. And it's in our space, room 315. But on that note, I feel like a big part of this conversation is also people not wanting to go to those jobs because a master's degree is this status thing to a certain extent. And one of the things that I love questioning with Embark Gallery, it's a graduate-focused gallery, is what is the value of an MFA? You know, and being 1 year out, I would love to hear from all of you what your takeaway is in terms of what was the best thing that you got out of your grad program. And that might be kind of a broad question, but I'm really thinking in terms of, you know, was it the people you met, the social network? Was it the, you know, best practices? Or, you know, what was the best thing? And if there was anything traumatizing, or that you would, you know, if you could go back in time to tell yourself to do differently, you'd be like, don't pay for the so-and-so, or, you know, don't invest so much time in the blankety blank. So, full honesty.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it right with your first comment. It is the community of people and the network that you build through an MFA program. So I don't know in what way teaching and education comes into that as much as the education of your peers and of people who are mentors. But that whole combination is so valuable, and like I think in San Francisco, all the shows I've had since then have been through peers. People who've gotten spaces or invited me to be part of something. And then having those opportunities has fed into my art practice. They actually create new work. Because I think that's one of the hardest things about Indian MFA program is you get this drop off where you have to go do something else. You feel really obliged to meet rent or to see people and travel or whatever it is. But making work and like actually having a studio, I tried not to have a studio for the 4 months when I came back, and then finally just gave up because it's impossible to work out of my living room with 3 roommates. You have to always put something away. You just need a space, to lay everything out and make a mess and then not worry about it. So I think definitely the people. The trauma, I'm not so sure. I didn't feel so traumatized. I feel like I needed
to
a
give
break.
a little context to that portion of the question, I talked to one artist in New York when I was doing residency there, who was talking about their experience with their MFA, and they loved it, but they did say that they had one professor's voice that it took them years to exercise out of their head because it was such a critical voice who was telling them not to do the thing they wanted to do. And while critiques and things are a huge part of the MFA process, there can also be that, those humps that you have to get over that are maybe good for you, but also a little traumatizing. So that's the source of that question.
I think you have to have perspective with it because it's such a small slice of time, and it may not represent your work or who you are as an artist or as a person. But definitely there were people who had unpleasant things to say about me and my work. I haven't really thought about it though.
Good, that's a good sign.
I think the momentum is the main thing that you need coming out of an MFA program. Just keep going, keep showing, hear different voices, and then the trauma's gone. I don't know.
For me, also the number one thing was the community, just being part of this incredible community of people who just care so much about what they're doing and having these Mills is a really small program. There were only 10 people in my class, and so we just got to know each other in depth. We spent so much time together and had so much access to faculty and just a lot of really wonderful conversations about art that just felt really fruitful, and we're totally spoiled with our studios. If you guys have been on campus, it's like a country club. I've never been to a country club, but I've seen them on TV, and I think that Mills is modeled after that. It's got rolling green hills and beautiful, huge, 500 square foot studios with full light and 24-hour access to the wood shop and the metal shop, and there's nobody there. And so, it was just an incredible place to make work. And for me, coming out was pretty traumatic because the reality hits you of wow, I would have to be a millionaire to afford this kind of studio outside of the academic context, and then just not being part of that community every day was it's hard. I've had to really make a concerted effort to reach out and try and collaborate with the people that I was really close with and make work with them just to maintain that kind of connection. But the worst thing about grad school is the cost, ridiculous. Okay, and that I'm not quite sure how I'm going to pay off my student loans, but in the program it's just the kind of thing that you have to just deny and just do your work.
Yeah.
And then, I guess I have 25 years to figure it out, so we'll see what happens. But I was at Mills during a very, very tumultuous time. My mentor, the main reason that I studied there was to study under Anna Valentina Murch, who was the head of sculpture. And while I was there, she unexpectedly died. And there was nobody there to replace her. And then Amy Franceschini, who was the other person that I really wanted to work with, resigned, and Hung Lu retired.
Yeah.
And Catherine Wagner was in Rome on a residency. So there was nobody there, and one of my best friends in the program dropped out, and nobody knew what was going on, and we spent so much time and effort and stress as a graduate class, like coming together, like how are we gonna fix it? How are we gonna fix our program? We have to like have meetings and invite outside artists and like make this the richest experience possible, and doing all these like administrative things that like in hindsight we should have just let them figure it out and just focus on our work, because that was really like the point of the program, was to just get your focus on your work, tighten it up, get it to the next level, and just kind of like use the program to nurture you. But like I think we just learned a hard lesson to just let the administrators do their job, and just carry on with our practice.
I think I'll start with the trauma and just echo what you were saying.
Okay.
A little bit. I mean, leaving is the most traumatic thing. The amount of resources that you have available to you, especially not just the studio, but also the workshops, just having access to a wood shop and a darkroom and all these sorts of tools that I use all the time, 24 hours a day, and then all of a sudden not having that anymore is a very difficult thing to shift my practice into, and the kind of limitations that entails, not having those access. So that's been definitely something that I've had to negotiate around a bit. Again, getting into the headlands cushions that a lot, but I'm still longing for the days of the cushy facilities and studio that I had. And then I think the best part was not just the community. I mean, one of the things that was most alluring to me about the program at Stanford is that it's part of a large university, and so the community extends beyond the art community there. I met so many people who are engineers or historians or writers, people pursuing like this broad range of disciplines that really created a much more complicated conversation around what I was doing, what the place of art is in the world, frankly. I mean, you talk to somebody who's training to be a pediatric surgeon, and you're like, oh, I make pictures. It seems really trivial at a certain level. And so you really have to think about why you make art, why you think art education is important, and you have to learn how to articulate that to somebody who's really had no interest in art in their entire life. And that having to do that repeatedly, basically defend my position at that university, which a lot of people certainly felt free to question, was actually really healthy. And I think for the most part, I was able to convince people that there was some benefit to what we were doing there.
Oh my God,
which
can
is
you
good.
tell us? What's it all for?
New conversations
That may be getting off the topic. Yeah, we can talk about that later.
Okay.
And the most difficult thing, I think, or the thing I wish I had done better, which is easy to say in hindsight and was very difficult in the moment, was actually take advantage of all those resources that were available. The libraries there, the museums, the special collections had so many incredible things and so many resources for me as an artist that every day I went there, I felt guilty for not taking advantage of them better. And so, I would do things like, I was interested for a while in making some work about celestial bodies, and so they had a book that was hand printed by Galileo in like 1600, and I'd just go to the library and be like, can I see that book? And they'd hand it to me, and I'd be like, okay, that's great, and look at Galileo's drawings of the moon, and just opportunities like that are so rare in the world, that if you do go to an institution, any institution, I mean, every institution in the Bay Area has some sort of resource like that, and really making the effort to find out what it is that they have available to you, and going there, like looking at the objects, looking at the history that they have there, that can inform your art practice in ways that maybe you don't expect, and just exposing yourself to as much as possible, because once you're out of the institution, that becomes much more difficult.
Yeah, I think that's also a good point, that those resources are not just available to students. You're there, you're on site, and you think of them immediately, but a lot of those are public.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I've been to the Stanford
You're
Library
right.
Archives and had them pull things.
Yeah.
And it maybe takes a bit more time, but it's good to remember that we don't completely lack support just because we are finished.
Yeah.
And particularly, there are people who remember you there, so you can go back.
No, that's a very, very good point. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think I went to a big research institution as well, and so for me, the access to the other departments was pretty special, and I did take a lot of classes, and so like one thing that I did, grad school, I felt like was like this amazingly self-indulgent period of time where it's just like about me, I'm gonna do whatever I want and stuff like that, and it was really great, and it shifted a lot of the way I think about making things, but taking classes in geography or like rhetoric or these different areas that for me funnel into my art practice were really great, but then it also kind of helped me understand different contexts that my work can exist in. So kind of like what you were saying, like constantly defending it, but also that those are other people that I met who might be interested, and there's different ways that you can do projects and work among, you know, different places, and I thought that was really special, a special kind of thing that happened for me there. Yeah.
Okay, well, I have one last question for you, and it may be a little bit off of the original focus of jobs in that first year out of grad school, but another thing that Embark Gallery really focuses on is the Bay Area, like this very local, interesting, specific geography. And one of the things we like to think with the program is that if, you know, we get a group of people from different schools together and they meet each other, we'll have a bigger community here that'll make them more motivated to stay here. And we're at the super cool fair that started in San Francisco, that's trying to do different things. You know, San Francisco's always been a really creative, interesting place that way. So my last question is, are you going to stay in the Bay Area? Because you've been here for 1 year out of grad school, which I think is fantastic because you're using that community you've made through the 2-year, 3-year MFA programs that you've gone through. Are you going to stay in the Bay Area? And why aren't you going to New York or LA where there's a huge art market? That's the other knee-jerk reaction some grad students have, is go where the market is. So why are you staying here?
I mean,
Might be a hard question.
I'm not
Sorry.
particularly interested in making marketable work at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like too much of a difference coming from an academic background going into a market-ready working space that I would change my work too drastically and maybe lose a little bit of focus. So for me, maybe New York or LA makes sense in different ways, but San Francisco actually has quite a good scene for putting together strange events, having the freedom to make something new. There's a sense that there's not much history here, but there's actually quite a lot. And right now it feels right, but also I think it's a hard place to stay when everyone experiences that. So I don't want to say that I'll be here for another 3 years, another 5, but I think I'll be here next year, I know, and I may be here another couple. But I think there's nothing wrong with feeling a little bit, like take it one step at a time, and as an artist to be a little bit more nomadic can be good, because it's that spirit of like take an opportunity when it comes, say yes to everything. So last summer I was in Spain and back here, but I'm going to Norway for the whole summer, and actually that provides a little bit of a cushion because it's a residency that pays for rent and facilities and an art exhibition, and so everything's provided. So to take that time off, even if it would just be to go, like go back to a farmer in the country or somewhere, go back to where my family is at, I think it would still work in that way to take a moment to really focus on what I want to be doing with art and then come back to the balancing act. But otherwise, I think this is a really rich area. I wouldn't see people wanting to leave. I think it's not a choice always.
I'm planning on staying. I mean, I considered leaving at first, but going north, like towards the country, because I just not really an urban type of person, and I wanted like a country studio, but my means of making a living, my chocolate shop is in Berkeley, and so it's really grounding and really just something that like I kind of have to plan my life around, and so I'm just planning on staying here and then having this as my home base, but definitely taking opportunities to bring my art elsewhere. I met someone yesterday at Parking Lot Art Fair that wants me to do a performance in Australia, so hopefully the grant will come through and I'll go there.
Fantastic.
But yeah, I think, I mean, for me, as someone who's like really, really busy and not super into like going out and hobnobbing, doing art openings and stuff, there is always plenty to do and see in San Francisco. Sometimes, like on my Facebook events, there's like 10 different things happening on the same day, and I'm like, wow. I might go to one, but I'm probably not going to go to any. And so, you know, for me to like try and go somewhere where there's even more happening, I think would be like totally pointless. So I'm perfectly fine staying right here.
It's a bit of a trick question for me because I'm from the Bay Area and my family's here, so I have motivation outside of my profession in order to stay here. But you know, in terms of motive to stay here, I've worked in the kind of photo world in the Bay Area for a long time now, for 10 years, and so I've built up a network of people that I feel very close to and are very supportive of me, and both before graduate school and within graduate school. And those are people that I've relied upon a lot for presenting me with opportunities and helping me out when opportunities do come about. And so that's a huge motive, just that network of artists and teachers that I've just built up over the years through friendships as much as anything else, and professional experiences, is something that I could not replicate in any other place. That being said, one of the most alluring things to me about a career as an artist is the opportunity to travel and see the world. So going to Norway or traveling to Australia to do projects is, sounds amazing to me. I just spent 3 months in Paris. I mean, that was great, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had a regular job. So I think that even if I continue to live here as my permanent home, I'm going to take as many opportunities as I can to get outside of the area, outside of the country, and spend significant chunks of time in residency programs or visiting professor positions all over the world, hopefully. So I do hope to travel, but I'm like Christopher. I'm not all that motivated to force my work into something that's going to be more marketable. And I think that within San Francisco, there's enough of an art scene, and especially now that I have the ability to travel to LA or New York if opportunities do present themselves, I can hopefully still have a productive career without necessarily needing to live in those places, and just maybe develop some contacts there.
I don't know.
Good answer.
I will probably always I feel like I already have lived in New York. I lived in New York for 4 years. I took a lot of time between finishing undergrad and going to grad school. So, although it would be really great to go live in New York again, I also think there's so many different really rich places to go. And so if a teaching job came up, or if things happen, there's like a lot of great things I think that could happen. That said, in blasting it is like a discussion of me kind of like crying on the street in West Oakland and being like, but I've lived here for 10 years. I feel like I'm supposed to stay here. Like, there's things that I have gotten to a point at, and it might just be my age, where I'm like, oh, but I've really invested a lot into this place, and I feel like it has also fed me in a lot of ways. So I think it'll just be like a constant conversation, as it was when I did live in New York. Like, I should leave, I'm gonna leave, it's just kind of always gonna be on the table. But things like getting into grad school was like, oh great, I'm gonna be here for at least 2 years, or getting a fellowship for, at the studio, I'm definitely gonna be here for another year. So it's like kind of following the things that come up that are in front of you that I think dictate it. And being in this profession is what allows that to kind of happen. So it's like the really low parts where it's like, I don't have enough money to buy, my rent or food or whatever, are accompanied by the sort of joy of being able to say, yes, I'm going to go to Paris for 3 months, or yes, I'm going to take this residency at the Richmond Field Station for a year, and it's going to be precarious, and perhaps the wherewithal to live within that precarity is part of, what is the draw sometimes.
Well, thank you. If you have any questions, now would be the time. But I think that this has been an amazing talk, and thank you so much for taking the time to do it. I feel that this subject is something that, when this video comes out, it's going to be gold to current students, just because you have this feeling of uncertainty, whether you have a past job that you can go back to, or whether you're going to stay or leave, and all of these questions that you try to not think about until the day you graduate, and then here you are. But I think a lot of great stuff has come out of this, so thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.